Let's put you in the shoes of someone else. You're little Timmy, who's been playing TVZ and its spin-offs all your life. So, 2 years, you're a 2-year-old, and you somehow through your 2 years experience of the internet discovered that mods are a thing, and decide to download one to your totally not emulated Android device. You then realize that Melon cost more sun, and promptly died. You are now dead. You spontaneously combusted, and now you're in a hole in the ground. This is the dumbest intro to a video I've ever done. Anyways, little Timmy is now dead, but we have to realize why he died. Because, you see, mods nerf a lot of plants in PvZ 2. It is non-common for up to 70 to 80% of all plants to get nerfed, directly or indirectly, in mods. And in more vanilla-styled mods, that percentage can still be around 20 to 30% or so, which is a lot of plants in the game with about 200 plants. This is a fairly high number, and one that can seem a little odd, especially without context as to why. I think this video is fairly important, because this has certainly caused divides in the community often. This is notable with mods like Eclise, which historically has scared people away at the mere prospect of plants like banana causing upwards of 1000 sun. Though even simpler mods like Reflourished, where Melon especially has been criticized endlessly for being nerfed. What I want to do is look at the key arguments of why plants shouldn't be nerfed that people bring up often, and cover why these arguments are, generally, not necessarily correct. Without further ado, let's get into it. The title of this section should probably hint you in at the biggest issue people have with nerfing. The concept of the game should be buffed more to compensate for nerfs. This argument is very complicated, as there are several ways people make this argument. That's why there are so many videos on this content online, and why these videos are so popular. In fact, the very concept that these videos are so popular helps feed into the truth that they are correct, as probably the biggest argument is that nerfs aren't very popular. A very big video on this concept is Corey's Gaming's analysis, why we should buff more than nerf, and this argument is very sound. The video is very well made. This argument, however, isn't really that all games should buff more than nerf. It's multiplayer games should buff more than nerf. While you can take some of the arguments of the video and apply them generally, that doesn't mean you should. Single player games are very different in a lot of ways for a reason, and this includes the actual implications of nerfing, buffing, and power creep. Simply put, buffs and nerfs apply to both a winner and the loser in a multiplayer game. They both fought on technically equal ground, as both could choose the same character and thus play a perfectly balanced match. The only difference would be player skill. In a single player game, however, buffing the player means they are more likely to win, and nerfing a player means they are more likely to lose. The enemy side does not gain the same changes, at least in PvZ 2, and are therefore stagnant. This also means power creep is a way bigger issue. Power creep is a good thing in many multiplayer games, as it keeps the game evolving in new ways. In a single player game, it's a lot more difficult, and while some games do this, Bloons Tower Defense 6 comes to mind, it is a hard thing to manage, and that is putting it mildly. In reality, most single player games won't ever receive balance changes, and if they do, it's usually for specific reasons. You can look at PvZ 2 itself for this. While some plants got minor changes over the years, less than 5% of the plants got a significant change in the decade since release. As a result, buffing plants in the PvZ 2 mod may not make a lot of sense, but neither should nerfing. Well, that's because the point of a buff or a nerf is critical, and not relevant to PvZ 2 at base. For PvZ 2 vanilla, you see, this is because of power creep. They introduce, generally, one new plant per month, each plant being stronger than the last. Usually. With the way Arena works, the zombies will gain more HP each time the player makes progress, so power creep is not only accounted for, but expected. Oh, and because I should mention this somewhere, PvZ 2 vanilla is just a base game. Vanilla is the normal version of the game. I've had some people ask this before, so just to clarify, when I say PvZ 2 vanilla, I mean the PvZ 2 you're most familiar with. It's just language, modding terminology. Moving on. To further this concept, keep in mind that newer zombies are used often in arena modes, and are far stronger than the zombies in the main game. Zombies like Consultant, Scorpion, and Hamster Ball alone are far more dangerous than the largest threats in PvZ 2 before, by a lot. This, however, results in a lot of the game feeling centralized. When playing optimally, you find that you would rather use broken plants than anything else, and the game pushes that mentality in Arena and Penny Pursuit, and the plants are generally balanced with that in mind. The issue is that in a mod, Arena and Penny's Pursuit literally cannot exist, so this becomes a real issue. The player being able to blast through every level of Pokhara is an option that, frankly, doesn't seem all too fun. It trivializes the main game, and the player never really has a way to be challenged with it. Without challenge, there isn't reward, and games can become boring quick. This is a common trend of cheating and hacking in single player games. A lot of people say that this becomes boring quite quickly after a while. So, as a mod developer, if you want these plants to be used, they need to be normalized with the rest of the plants. Now, this is me talking about a very specific set of plants, one that doesn't really matter. After all, most people aren't going to complain about nerfing plants designed with the express purpose to be broken. They're going to complain about the base game plants being nerfed. This entire discussion so far might seem pointless as a result, but I wouldn't be so sure. You see, this exact argument is why plants like Melon get nerfed so often in mods, and why plants shouldn't be buffed to the same level. This may sound dumb, but let me explain. Ignore the specific wording, I don't want to talk exclusively about winter here, but it's a main plant usually, so yeah. Now, when you look at a mod, it's important to keep in mind context. The kind of player likely to play a mod is fundamentally a player who is going to have a lot of experience with the game. For a player to play a mod, they need to actively seek it out, and will rarely have little experience with the main game as a result. You can see this by the popularity of hard mode mods for practically every game in existence. However, for a game like PvZ2, this can prove to be a problem, because PvZ2 is a game where, for the most part, balancing is done more so through power creep, and based on a casual playstyle, one which, frankly, less and less people are going to be using as time goes on and mods get picked up. This results in some huge issues, most coming down to a single problem that needs solving. Players who know what they are doing won't have a use for 70 to 80% of plants in the game. A good player at the game will not use plants like Lightning Reed, Repeater, Peapod, Coconut Cannon, Bloomerang, Spikeweed, or Melon Pult. Not because these plants are at all bad. Coconut Cannon and Peapod especially are straight up amazing plants, but because there are plants even stronger, that makes these plants never really worth using. Why use Coconut Cannon when Banana has more control of its firing, board range, and more damage, with the only real drawback being that it no longer has 3 times resplash? Or use it over Wintermelon, a plant that deals a ton of damage, supports itself, and synergizes with the best plants in the game, Explosive Instas? There is no real reason beyond challenging yourself, which doesn't exactly bode well for people who don't want to. As a result, some plants need nerfs to ensure the game has more options. Sure, Winter and Banana may be fun to use, but nerfing them would help bring out other options. Even if these other options may be technically less interesting, they are still different, which is important. Even if these plants become entirely useless as a result, the game is still overall better due to variety. Mods are played by people familiar with the main game, so it is important to shake things up to ensure that they don't get bored, and to create a new experience. However, there is one other element that needs to be brought up. You see, so far you may think that balancing here could be done through buffs, right? After all, couldn't you buff Peapod, Bloomerang, and Spikeweed up to the same levels as Wintermelon? Well, you could try. It would make an incredibly boring game though. If you want to see the consequences of making every plant as strong as Wintermelon, I would point you towards Late Game Endless, where a player is literally able to deal with infinite zombies of most kinds from as early as the second wave. That's not exactly great, and this is only with one set of absurdly broken plants. Could you imagine if there were more? Now, to be blunt, Wintermelon isn't the actual problem here, alone at least. The bigger issue is actually Cherry Bomb. Not Primal Potato Mine, Cherry Bomb. This thing is absurdly broken. Every 35 seconds, you can clear out usually about half the entire field. That is far too low, and so you'd have to balance the entire game around Cherry Bomb, and making every plant equal, or synergetic, with a strategy that boils down to slow down the zombies until they can make them explode. Because you can't make a plant more effective than instas in their current state. Oh man, Primal Potato Mine makes this even worse. It's an even stronger version of the plant, with exceedingly little weakness and equally little recharge. with a plant food effect that will totally clear out the screen of more or less everything. Even without this, just having a second 3x3 area remover turns Cherry Bomb explosives to a 35 seconds half screen clear to a 35 seconds full screen clear. If you were to balance a game around these, well, every level would have to look like this, and thus no zombie would matter. Ever. In a game where plants are always broken, individual zombies stop mattering. Who cares if it's a basic, a conid, or a bucket? It's going to explode the same. The zombies that matter become the ones that can do things instantly, or can resist instants. These just so happen to be the zombies people find annoying or frustrating, like All-Stars, Octo-Zombies, and Breakdancers. A game where these kinds of zombies are used constantly hardly seems fun, presumably to us both, and that is why we can't expect mods to buff up to the level of Cherry Bomb. And when that is nerfed, Winter is just overwhelmingly strong compared to other offensive options still, so it gets nerfed. Now, the alternative is, just don't make levels like this, but then you get the Stadium Plan issue. They aren't fun to use in normal levels, as they break the game in half. The entire point of playing a mod is to get away from this issue, or at least that's the way a lot of mod creators think. And to be frank, mod creators don't get anything out of making a mod, so to be real they may as well do what they damn want, right? And all this is ignoring the fact that most mods quite literally rework the entire game. Plants in this instance aren't even really being nerfed, they just so happen to be weaker than the main game counterparts. Like, Melon isn't exactly being nerfed in Eclise AlphaVerse, as much as it happens to be weaker in this very different game mechanically. That is the final reason nerfs don't matter, and mods should do them. Because, realistically, they aren't happening. A plant being nerfed from vanilla shouldn't matter. Mods don't replace the main game. They are modifications, made by a dedicated team of individuals. To be real with you, I think complaining about a plant like Primal Sunflower being nerfed in a game which, unless you are Reflourished, isn't even attempting to be the same thing as vanilla, is incredibly dumb and more so amusing than anything with a real point. Oh, and I didn't really have anywhere to say this, but vanilla Sun producers are so absurd that they need to be nerfed if you want them to mean anything, and often that's with plants that cost well over 500 max in vanilla. Plants tend to cost more in mods for this reason, in an attempt to make cheap plants worth anything whatsoever. Either way, I think it is worthwhile to finish off by covering other criticisms of nerfs that people came up with. More specific ones, that admittedly are more so specifically for Reflourished overall, but are important to keep in mind regardless. This isn't to mock them, for clarity, but I'll still remove names just in case. Here, this guy says that nerfing plants makes the game less casual. I don't believe this to necessarily be true, actually. As weird as it may seem, I don't think casual games are necessarily easy. I believe casual games as a concept aren't a discussion of difficulty, but complexity. A casual game can be hard, as long as the mechanics are generally simple. I don't think nerfing plants or making the game harder really are the deciding factors in making the game no longer casual. I also don't think that this is really an issue, to be honest. Even if changing plants by nerfing them could change the game from being casual, the kind of player playing mods are likely not going to be casual players. I really just don't see this as an actual issue. It's a mod at the end of the day, the base game is still there, and the base game is already casual focused. Mods should do things differently, as they are at the end of the day, modifications to the base game. This guy comments on Reflourished specifically, and how some levels become way harder. This is a very real concern, but also an issue with Reflourished rather than the concept of buffs and nerfs. This does happen a lot in Reflourished due to balance changes, and in reality the base level should have been tested more before release. Levels like Jurassic Mars 29 come to mind here, which were already difficult before the plants got nerfed in Reflourished. This dude seems to claim that Reflourished nerfed Primal Sunflower so much that it produces less sun than Sunflower. It doesn't. I get the sense that a lot of criticism of these buffs and nerfs are based on incorrect knowledge or people just not understanding things. That's fine and human, but also important to keep in check. Like, don't talk about utter nonsense, please. This isn't a thing directly commented on, but this is a video from a guy, link below, who had issues with endless zones being harder because of balance changes in Reflourished. This isn't an issue. Endless zones should be an actual challenge, and being able to go infinitely means that the player is capable of dealing with any amount of zombie, hence proving halls are useless. This is the balance changes working as intended, and while people may not like it, it ensures that endless zones can do their job, being an actual challenge to max out in. Either way, I hope I've explained well why mods changing plants to be weaker is a good thing, because it truly is important. If mods didn't, then we would just be playing the same game over and over and over again. That's not fun, and I think it's crucial to allow the modding community to continue. Some final notes though, before we sign off. Reflourished is probably the worst example of plants being nerfed and buffed, which is why this became such an issue really. More so because it can't ever really be great. Vanilla is inherently balanced around broken plants in more than a few cases, so the base game there is always going to suffer. Additionally, the reluctance to make plants too expensive or too different to not scare casual players really hurts plants like Winter and Primal Potato Mine, which have been forced to be super different. In reality, a lot of plants in the base game are still practically useless, such as Free Peter, Kernel, or other similar plants, and some plants are still way stronger than they really should be in the mod, such as Celery. That's more so because Reflourished strengths lay elsewhere rather than its balance changes, frankly. 25 Sun mods tend to get weirder changes than 50 Sun ones, mostly because of Sun cost related reasons, but also that weirder stuff tends to work well in them. With less Sun, cheaper plants are more useful, and more specialized options can sometimes be more reasonable. Just a note to keep in mind, you shouldn't ever compare plants between mods where sunflowers produce 25 and 50 Sun. Or really generally frankly, as mods change a lot of the game in most cases. Waves are slower and work differently in every single mod, and vanilla. Don't compare if you can. And that'll be all. I have to go clean up some space in my files. This has been Creeps, and have a good one.